time, the children are invited to go to children's ministry with Julia, and she's right there at the exit sign in the back. And so this summer, we are diving into beauty as a spiritual practice. And we've invited some of our parishioners and some of our friends to share what beauty has been and has meant for them and how that connects to their spirituality, how they experience God. And so today we have a very, very special guest here with us, Olugbemisola. I've been practicing saying that, right? Because I know her as Bemi. But Olugbemisola Rhuday-Perkovich is the author of several children's books, including Operation Sisterhood. She's a best book and independent next pick called A Jubilant Middle Grade Novel by the New York Times. She's also the author of It Doesn't Take a Genius, Makeda Makes a Birthday Treat, Saving Earth, The Climate Change, and The Fight for Our Future. Also, Someday Is Now, Two Naomis, and The Sun Does Shine, which is a young reader's school library journal and Chicago Public Library Best Book of the Year. She is a member of the Brown Bookshelf, a former board member of the We Need Diverse Books, and contributor to several anthologies, including We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices. She's written many articles and essays for various outlets, including PBS Parents, Read Brightly, and American Baby. Olugbemisola has worked extensively in literacy and youth development and was twice awarded a public service fellowship for her work. Olugbemisola was born in New York City, spent many years as the new kid in lots of schools in different cities. She now lives with her family in New York and says she lives here where she makes things, writes, talks back to her cat, and needs to get more sleep. I met Bemi over 20 years ago in a parenting group, and when I came here in 2019, she was here. I count her as one of the many surprises of St. Peter's, Chelsea. I commend her to you. She sits in the back of the pew. You never know she's here, but you're gonna get to know her today. I commend to you. Bemi, come on up. So as I've mentioned, I got to know Bemi over 20 years ago when when Leachai was, I was carrying him probably. Yeah. So it was a long time ago. So I'm excited to get to really talk to you. Back then we talked mom things, all motherhood. Yeah. Now I get to know you as an artist and get to share you with the community. So we'll dive right in. What is your earliest memory of experiencing beauty?
Oh, thank you for having me. I was stumped, with all the questions, but I was stumped with this one too. I thought about one, when I was very young, seeing my grandmother and my mother make themselves formal clothes. So for a special occasion, they made a lot of things, and then for special occasions, there was one in particular where they had made themselves these beautiful full outfits, dresses, and these capes or whatever, and they just looked so beautiful. And it really struck me that they had made these things themselves that made themselves look beautiful. And for my grandmother especially, my mom was born in Jamaica and my grandmother was Jamaican, and my grandmother, she had an accent. Mm-hmm. And I think for her especially, making these beautiful things was sort of like a dignity cloak for her. And she was very tall, she was 5'11", and she had very good posture, and so she carried herself in a way that was very regal. Mm-hmm. And when she made those things for herself, it made her even more regal. So there was that. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 7-ish, we took this trip to Italy, and at that point, it was very hard to find black dolls here in the States. And so my sister and I pretty much only had the dolls that my mom made, that our aunties made, very few store-bought dolls, because my mom did not buy white dolls, to the point where someone gave me a doll once from like a TV show, and it was a white doll, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I was like panicking. And so I took the doll and buried her in the backyard. I was just like, I don't know what to do. So we took this trip, and when we got to Rome, I can remember walking past this toy store, and it was just like black dolls, like rows and rows of black dolls on display. And at the same time, the people, my sister and I, like when we would just be walking down the street with my mom, people would come up to us and pet us and be like, oh, Bella, Bella. But even at 7, and especially for my sister who was like 3 at the time, she was like really mad. She was like, get off me. I was like, there's sort of this idea that these dolls are beautiful and that we are kind of like those dolls, but there is also something really unpleasant about this.
Yeah, sure. This is interesting because I'm hearing you talking about those first impressions of it, and it includes things being made, and you're a writer. Tell us a little bit more about how you've experienced beauty in your writing or in your writing practice.
I think in general, writing and just making things, there's something really beautiful to me about sort of pulling from all these different thoughts or questions and ideas and trying to make something that has meaning out of it. For me, writing is always about just sort of exploring questions, asking more questions, figuring out what I think, maybe not getting to an answer, but that exercise of thinking and figuring it out is beautiful to me. I came to writing very much as a reader. I was a voracious reader as a kid. I was a very shy kid. And because I went to a different school for every grade up until 8th grade. And sometimes it was in different countries, and so I was always that new kid over and over and over again. And so books for me were a real constant, and they were a way that I read to even just figure out how I was gonna sort of walk in these different worlds and different cultures. And as a new kid, it helped me as a writer because I had to notice things. I had to really pay attention to detail. I had to figure out, how am I gonna fit into this new community? Who are the kids that everyone wants to be around? Who are the kids that everyone stays away from? Who are the kids that I know I wanna stay away from? So I came to it through that, and then also because I was so shy when I was in middle school, my parents forced me to do drama. And in the beginning, I really was not happy about it, and I hated it. But then I really did grow to love it, both in performance and in writing, and then reading a lot of plays. And I was not allowed to watch very much TV, but I was always having access to books. I could have as much access to books and reading material as I wanted, and I was what I like to call a free-range reader. So whatever was there, I could read. So I read a lot of stuff that was way over my head, I didn't understand, but I did learn to sort of make my own meaning and just have that relationship with stories and books where I could work out my own ideas and then explore through writing my own stories and sort of match what I read with the stories that I heard from my family.
So I'm hearing you're a maker, a creative, and even with the words, like you're stringing the words together to, and I just read in your bio, you said, I'm a maker, and so that really struck me. How do you bring beauty into your sphere of influence?
Into my sphere of influence. I mean, I don't know if I have a sphere of influence.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
How do I bring beauty in? I mean, I think that I'm curious about people and about the world, and so I'm always looking to find beauty in the communities that I'm in the world that I'm in. I'm always just looking to listen, and I think there is something very beautiful in us listening to each other and noticing each other. And I think in terms of writing, in trying to honor, for me as a writer, primarily for children and young people, trying to honor the stories of the kids that I meet, that I've taught, trying to honor the story of the kid that I was, and always trying to say through my work to readers that they are loved and that they are respected just as they are.
So how has beauty impacted your faith life or your experience of God, or has it in any way?
I was thinking about a couple of things. One was, for a long time I was working in youth ministry, and at the same time I was working with middle schoolers at the cathedral of town, and then I was working with very, very young children in this very intense Bible study program that was very structured and very rule-oriented. And so a lot of my job was teaching Bible stories and then retelling those stories to the children. And so I really got to engage with Scripture as a story and looking even just sort of technically as a writer at how God shares his story with us and how we can make so many different meanings from that. It just taught me a lot about just the craft of writing and the beauty of storytelling and the way that I believe that Scripture is living, and so the way that the story just continues to live has had a real impact on me as a writer.
Could you tell us a little bit, just like a little bit about your practice of writing? Like, what is a writing day like for you?
Oh, Alicia. I always feel like people want an answer that's like, I get up and I sit at my really nice desk.
No, I want
and then
whatever
I pour
answer
my tea
is true
and
for you.
And it's just, I don't know, it's chaos. Like
It's chaos.
It's just like whatever the day is. I'm a morning person, so I do get up I wake up very, very early. I used to primarily get the bulk of my writing done in the morning, but I've learned over the years to get it done when I can. And to not, I used to be in a lot of workshops and settings where someone would say, like, you should write 3 hours a day, or you should complete this many pages a day, and like, you should write every day. So I don't believe any of those things. I think that you write with what works for your life. I think it makes a lot of people feel shame when they're not following those rules. And so I really try to, as much as I can, because I have deadlines and stuff, set goals for the day, writing goals for the day, and not just completely beat myself up if I don't meet them. I walk a lot. That's a big part of my writing practice, is walking. So I walk and walk and walk a lot. When I'm stuck, when I'm trying to figure out a story, when I just have a question, as soon as I start moving, I usually can figure out what I need to do. I write by hand before I write on my laptop, so I write a lot out in longhand. I'm always eavesdropping on the train or whatever, and so I take notes about things I hear, things I see, and a lot of that goes into my stories. And I spend a lot of time, writing starts with character for me, so every day I'm spending a lot of time thinking about my characters, putting them in different situations that may or may not go into the story, but I see something that happens and I'm thinking like, oh, what would my character do in this situation? And what else? It means working on multiple projects at the same time, which is not ideal. But each day I'm usually working on at least 2 or 3 different projects.
I think I asked you that because I wanted to hear that. I wanted to hear if it was more of an organic process and something that is in your body, that's an embodied experience, and you shared those things, that the walking and the writing by hand and the listening that you're always doing.
Yeah. And it's definitely not, sometimes people ask if I wait for inspiration or sort of wait, but it's work, so I have to sort of show up to do my work every day. Sometimes it's not that successful, but I show up for it.
You kind of hinted at writer's block or being stuck, and you talked about moving your body. I'm always stuck. Moving your body as part of that. Do you experience that as like a spiritual dryness at all, or? I'm curious. It's just.
I think sometimes, yeah.
And how do you process that? Like, so you're walking, your body is moving, but what's happening in your heart and mind?
It's funny, I was talking to, I'm a member of the Community of the Holy Spirit, and I was talking to my advisor there, and I was telling her, like, oh, I feel guilty, my prayer life feels dry, and she was like, oh, but your writing is your prayer. That's your form of prayer. And just her saying that to me sort of released a lot of the guilt that I was feeling. And so it's the same, I think, when I start walking. Like, I'm less focused on, oh, I'm sitting here and what I'm writing is so bad, or I have writer's block. Once I start moving, I just start thinking about the story, and I think about how am I going to serve this work, and I think about how it's never going to be what I think I want it to be in my head, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we'd hoped that you would share a brief reading with us. Thank you so much for answering those questions, processing through that with us. We could probably sit here forever, but she's going to read a bit from, I believe, Operation
Sisterhood. Yeah. I'll read a bit from chapter 1. So I'll just say that it's a middle grade novel about 4 sisters and stepsisters who live in the city, babysit, start a band. It's told from the point of view of Bo, and chapter 1 starts with Bo. So, it really was a dark and stormy night, and it figured, thought Bo. Of course it was a dark and stormy night. Of course it was. Okay, so it wasn't actually night, technically. It was afternoon, and Bo sat on her bed looking through the iron child safety bars of her bedroom window, listening to the rain thunking against the metal fire escape outside. Still, dark and stormy afternoon was close enough. And on the same day that her teacher had made the whole class enter an annoying writing contest where the prize went to the worst writing possible. School was almost over, And instead of just letting Bo hang out in the band room with the monster drum set, Miss Phillip expected her to spend the time productively on a writing contest that didn't matter. What sense did that make? Miss Phillip said the contest was inspired by some guy who'd started his book with, "It was a dark and stormy night," which apparently was the worst writing ever, even if it didn't seem so bad to Bo. Certainly not as bad as spending an entire period trying your best to write your worst at school. She was sure that Mary Church Terrell would not be happy to have her name on a school that did things like that. And she was sure because she'd won the award for the best Mary Church Terrell speech last year. She'd always had the best teachers. She made cards and cookies for them every winter break. Until Miss Phillip. She was the kind of teacher who kept changing due dates after you already turned the assignment in. Bo had just given her a card that she bought at CVS, and she'd signed it best, which Mom had told her was petty polite. Still, Mom had let it slide. She was cool like that. Thunder clapped and Bo jumped. She heard her mom laugh down the hall. Bill must be telling one of his corny jokes again. Since neither of them had normal jobs, Bill and her mom had developed an afternoon tea routine that Bo had to admit was pretty cute. When he'd arrived today, shaking his wet umbrella all over the floor, he'd said, "If anyone needs an ark, I happen to know a guy." And Mom had actually for real laughed. Bo had laughed too, mostly because it was such a bad joke that she couldn't do anything else, and because she liked Bill and his corny jokes, and because he'd winked at her. He'd known it was bad, but he'd said it anyway, and there was something good about that. Bo liked Bill a lot, but now that he had his own key to their apartment and felt comfortable enough to be shaking his umbrella all over the place, it made Bo a tiny bit itchy.
Don't go away yet. I'm gonna keep you for 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Because I want to ask you the question about bringing beauty into your sphere of influence. You gave an answer, but I thought about, as you walked in this morning and the greeter and I were next to you, and we both commented on what you were wearing, and she told us that she made it. That she made it. And so I'm thinking about this term maker. That's the first thing you use to describe yourself. And you also have a really beautiful knitting practice, and you've blogged about that. And so I'm not trying to put her on the spot, although I am. But yeah, I just see this really beautiful way that you are creating all the time. Do you realize it like that, or do you notice it in that way?
I mean, I do really, from childhood, I've always wanted to create all the time. I was always, because like I said, we're not allowed to watch that much TV. So when I would go to school and my friends would talk about the shows that they watched, I would go home, I would pretend I knew what they were talking about. And I would go home and I would make little books for my little sister and like draw and write and illustrate these little books. I used to like to build with building toys a lot. So yeah, I've always, and it was around me. And with writing, because my parents, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, they were always telling stories. And we would say, tell us stories about back home and just tell us. So they were always creating story. I had it around me.
Well, thank you for your time, Olugbemisola Rhuday-Perkovich.
Thank you, Lisa.
Maker extraordinaire.
Thank you, Lisa.